Hi, in this section we're going to go over short and long run production and cost concepts. This is a long video, so please take notes, and you will be using some of your notes to work on your homework problems. Okay, so when we start on this, let me just move this over a little bit so I can get to the little icons here. I'm going to start it in this fashion. Why start a business? Well, in our previous chapters, we've been talking about demand for a product and what drives demand. Well, if there's a demand for a product, that means that a business opportunity is possible. And so normally people start a business because they have a product or service that people need. They can sell it and they can make a profit off of it. Okay, so there's a demand for a product. And if you're selling, then you want to make as much money as you can, and you want to maximize that profit. So we're going to take a look at some business concepts here that we need to know about. The first is the difference between accounting profit and normal profit. And you know, it might help to understand the concept of profit also. Profit is your revenue minus your cost, and that will give you your profit. Now, that would, of course, beg the question, well, what is revenue? Where do we get that from? Well, revenue is the amount of product that is being sold times the price that you sell it at. So if you are in the lemonade business and you sell 10 glasses of lemonade for $1 each, that means your total revenue is $10. Okay, but that's not your profit. Why? Because you have to take your cost out of it. How much did it cost you to make that lemonade? Maybe it cost you $6 to make it. So you're going to take your $10 minus your $6, and that's going to give you $4 worth of profit. So that's a very simple explanation of profit. We're going to look at, for our purposes, the difference between accounting profit and economic profit. So see here the formula: revenue, accounting profit equals revenue minus explicit costs. Okay, so this is a new type of cost. What is explicit? Well, explicit means detailed and monetary. This is money that you can actually track going out the door. I'm paying for wages. I'm paying for rent. If you're making lemonade, I'm paying for the lemons. I'm paying for the ice. It's exactly the dollar amount that's going out. So we take our revenue minus our explicit cost, and that gives us accounting profit. And this is what you were probably working on in your accounting classes. Now, economic profit is different. Economic profit equals revenue, price times quantity, minus explicit costs, things that you're paying cash for, minus something called implicit cost. Okay, so implicit cost refers to implied costs, costs that are being incurred but can't necessarily track in terms of dollars. Okay, what kind of costs could those be? Well, if you decide to start a business and you give up your day job, the income you would have had from that day job is your implied cost. You're using your home to run your business. Well, there's an implied cost when you use your home. It may not necessarily reflect in the accounting statements, but that cost is there. So for economists, we take our revenue minus the explicit cost minus the implicit cost, and that gives us economic profit. Okay, so here's a nice picture. These boxes represent total revenue. See the brackets here? Total revenue coming in. Total revenue coming in. From an accounting perspective, if we just take out the explicit cost only, all this big blue box represents accounting profit. So it's pretty big. But from an economic perspective, economists are going to say, okay, all of this is our total revenue, and we're going to take out our explicit costs. But what about those implied costs? Now note here, implicit costs include a normal profit. So hold that thought. We'll talk about it in a minute. Explicit cost minus implicit cost give us economic profit. Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. What is a normal profit? So you will remember from the very beginning of the course, we talked about our 4 key resources. So what are they? They're land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Okay. Now each of those resources, when we're buying them in the market, they have a name for what we're paying for. So when we buy labor in the market, we pay wages. When we use capital and buy machinery and equipment, we pay interest. When we buy land, we pay rent. And when we start a business and we're being an entrepreneur and a risk taker, we pay a profit. And this is called a normal profit. It's considered to be a return to entrepreneurial ability. The accountant will not take this into account. Okay, it won't show up on the accounting books. But from an economist perspective, that entrepreneur needs to get paid a normal profit. So that is included in an economic cost. Okay, so note that all of this, we take out explicit and implicit costs, and that leaves us an economic profit. So economic profits tend to be smaller than accounting profits, but they also tend to reflect all the costs. Okay, another concept that is important to know before we go into this discussion about productivity and cost is what is a short run and what is a long run. Okay, now short run and long run means it's that period in which one input into making something is fixed and cannot be changed. Okay, so what this means is, for instance, if you opened up that restaurant, we have things that have to happen in there. Number one, we have to have equipment. And number two, we have to have people to run that equipment. And then we have to have the ingredients and the utilities, right? So fixed plant means that it's the equipment that you can't change that fast. Okay, you buy an oven and maybe you want to buy a second oven. It's not like you can go out that same day and get that second oven. You normally have to order it. It takes a while to come in. So you don't necessarily have the opportunity to change that stuff around. So fixed plant means it's kind of stuck there for a while. And then you have variable inputs like people coming to work and ingredients that you're buying that changes with the number of, for instance, if it's a restaurant, the number of plates of enchiladas that you are serving, okay? So we look at it in this context. So for economists, the short run is that period of time in which at least one input into the production process is fixed and cannot be changed. So some examples of this are, for example, if you think about your accounting statements, right? You have your income statement and then you have all your expenses. You have rent on a building, lease on equipment, contracts that are in place. Maybe you have a domain name and a website host, and all of these things are fixed. You can't change them right away. Examples of a variable input are labor, your cost of goods sold, for example. Sometimes in economics, you'll see a situation where labor is fixed and capital varies, and you'll probably get into that later on. But for this discussion, we're going to assume that it's labor that changes and capital that stays fixed. Okay, so short run, at least one input does not change. Long run means all the inputs can change and the firms can adjust their size with ease of entry and exit. Okay, get that little thing so I can go to the next slide. Okay, so if you're going to supply something, that means you're going to produce something, and you need labor and capital to produce a good or service. These are called inputs or factors of production. So that's kind of economic terminology that you want to know. Labor can be described as units of labor, and this might mean number of people, number of hours. The amount of labor can change depending upon how much product or service needs to be produced. Okay, that means you're in a restaurant, you have a busy day, you can call in more wait staff, call in more kitchen people to help you out. Capital, however, equipment, facility, website, domain name, etc., that is needed, but that cannot change. Okay, so now we're going to look at production and some of the assumptions of our production model. Okay, so production, how are we going to produce? Well, for purposes of our class, we're going to make some assumptions, and we're going to assume that all the labor going into the production process is of equal quality and they're all going to work equally hard, right? We're going to assume our technology is fixed. We're going to do it one way. That variable resources like labor will be added to the fixed resource like your equipment. And then we're going to look at a concept called marginal product and law of diminishing returns. Okay, so right now we're still setting the stage for all of this. If you can, try to watch this productivity scene from The Founder. It's a very good example of how to increase productivity with fixed capital. And in this scene, and I'm not going to show it in this video, you can click on it from your PowerPoint slides. What they are doing is they are outlining, if we put equipment in McDonald's, okay, because this is about McDonald's, how will we put our labor so that we can produce the most hamburgers possible? Okay, so this is a scene from The Founder. It's on YouTube, but if you can watch the movie, I think it's on Netflix, it would be a good thing. Okay, so now let's get into production a little bit. We have some key production relationships that you need to know about. Okay, so these are called short-run production relationships. And the first one is called total product. That's total output when the firm combines a variable input with fixed capital. How much is being made? The next concept is called marginal product. How much output or product came from the last unit of labor that we hired. Okay, so marginal product is the change in total product divided by the change in the labor input. And then we have another concept called average product. An average product is the total amount of product that's being produced divided by the number of units of labor that you are producing. And note here this little star, important formulas, learn these. I'll do a little example. Well, not yet. Short-run production concept. So total product, definition, total amount of a product that can be produced in a given time. Units of product are made per hour or per week, for example. So total product schedule shows how the quantity produced changes as we employ more labor. So we're going to have a schedule that's going to track for us, how much output is going to change when we employ more labor. Okay, so in this case, we're going to assume that we're opening a Subway sandwich shop, okay? And so the inputs, so think about a sandwich shop, any kind of sandwich shop that makes Subway sandwiches. There are inputs into the process. There's labor, ingredients, right? The lunch meat, the tomatoes, the lettuce. The restaurant pays utilities, it has equipment, and then it has a building. Now note that these things, well, utilities, equipment, and facilities aren't going to change. What does change is the labor and the ingredients, depending upon the output. So what we want to know is how changes in labor will change the amount of sandwiches being produced, given the size of our restaurant and the amount of equipment that we have. Now, we're going to invoke the concept of ceteris paribus, right? Remember, holding all things equal, chapter 1, I think. So we're going to hold all inputs constant. So we're going to assume the utilities, ingredients, etc. are not going to change. And what we want to look at is how many sandwiches are being produced as we add more people. Okay? So let me go to the next slide. Okay, so here we have what we call a total product schedule and a total product curve. So 2 assumptions: all labor inputs are equal, and 2, all resources are being used fully. So it's kind of like a production possibilities curve, and what we're trying to see is how many units or how many sandwiches we can produce given labor and holding everything else constant. So up here, if we have nobody working, 0 labor, we have no product, right? However, if we hire 1 person, that 1 person can now make 1 sandwich. Let's hire 2 people, and these 2 people together make 3 sandwiches. Let's hire the 3rd person, and these 3 people together produce 6 sandwiches. The 4th person, along with all the other ones, together they make 8 sandwiches. The 5th person, together with all the others, they make 9 sandwiches. We hire another person, and all of those 6 people produce 9 sandwiches. We hire a 7th person, and all of those people produce 8 sandwiches. We hire the 8th person, and 8 people make 6 sandwiches. And then we hire the 9th person, and the 9th person, with all 9 people, only produce 3 sandwiches. So we're going to graph this out. Okay, we put total product on the y-axis and quantity of labor on the x-axis, and we see 0 labor, 0 total product. One person working, 1 submarine sandwich. 2 people working, 3 submarine sandwiches. 3 people working, 6 submarine sandwiches. 4 people working, and we are getting 8 submarine sandwiches. 5 people working, 9 submarine sandwiches. 6 people working, 6 submarine sandwiches. 7 people working, 8 submarine sandwiches. 8 people working, 6 submarine sandwiches. 9 people working, 3 submarine sandwiches. So what happened? Why did our production go up and then top off and go down? So remember that we said capital is fixed. So the size of the kitchen is fixed. Think about a sandwich shop. They normally have a counter, and they're normally pretty small. So at first, when you start adding more people to the process, we begin to get synergies, okay? Perhaps they divide their labor and they work together, and together they can produce more. But eventually, when they get too many people behind the counter, they get in each other's way and their productivity starts to drop, okay? So that is called, we have increasing returns and it flattens out, and then we start to have decreasing returns to labor. The more people we get in one spot, the tighter it gets, the more inefficient it gets. So we're going to take a look at that concept. Okay, first concept we're going to look at is called average product of labor. So average product of labor, think about the word average. Okay, I want you to focus on what the words mean. Average means normally you're taking the total and you're dividing it by the quantity of product, or in this case, the quantity of labor. So average product is another word for productivity. So we're going to take total product, total output, divide it by the quantity of labor, and then we'll figure out, on average, how much is each person contributing to the production process. Okay, so I'm going to move this a little bit here. Okay, so here we have quantity of, these little graphs right, quantity of labor and total product. So when we're producing, we have one person working, 1 unit of output. So 1 divided by 1 gives us an average product of 1. We hire a second person, and these two people together make 3 sandwiches. So on average, how much is each person making? So we're going to take 3. Let's see if I can find my pointer here. We're going to take 3 divided by 2, and that's going to give us 1.5. So here we have 2 workers, and 2 workers are, let's see, we're making 3 sandwiches. So the average is 1.5. So 2 workers make 3 sandwiches, but if we were to average out the work, it would be 1.5 sandwiches each. Okay. Then 3 workers together make 6 sandwiches, right? But if we took 6 divided by 3, that would give us, on average, they're producing 2 sandwiches each. And if we continue to do this, 4 people make 8 sandwiches. They average out 2 sandwiches. So together they're making 4, but on average they're only making 2 each. Now, this is kind of an important point here because you can see that the total productivity starts to increase. But look at the shape of the total product curve. Okay, this total product curve starts to inflect. In other words, first we have increasing returns. Each additional person that we're adding, collectively our output is going up. But then between the third and the fourth person, our productivity flattens out. Okay, so this means that we're beginning to get filled up behind the counter. Okay, now we add the 5th person and output increases. So yes, 5th person output increases. But the 5th person, if we take 9 sandwiches divided by 5 people, now that means that each person is only producing 1.8 sandwiches, a little bit less. Okay, now total product is, we add a 6th person and our product stays at 9. So 6th person, we're producing 9, but because we've added 1 more person and we don't have that much more, our average product is 1.5 Subway sandwiches. Okay, our productivity is starting to drop. So this little point where average product flattens out, and we see this inflection in total product, means that after this, our productivity is going to start to drop. Okay. All right. So let's go to, so that's one production concept of productivity. So now we have total product, which is this big curve, and we have average product. Now we're going to look at a concept called marginal product. Okay, make this a little bit bigger. Okay. Marginal product, this is another important concept that you want to know. Marginal product tells us how much additional output is produced by the extra worker we hire. Okay, so now we want to know incrementally, we hired 1 more person. How much did that 1 more person add to the output? Okay, so for example, if 1 more unit of labor is added, what happens? So in this case, we call it marginal product of labor. So the marginal product of labor is going to be, and here's a formula, okay, that you're going to have to remember. And I'll talk to you a little bit about marginality in a little bit. It's going to look like you have a lot of formulas, but you really don't if you understand the concepts, okay? So extra. So how do we find 1 unit if, what's going on? So let's see. We want to know how much additional output. Well, let's go to our total product column right here. When we have 0 people hired to work, our total product is 0. Okay, so we're going to call this total product 1, just as a starting point. If I hire 1 person, then that 1 person is now making 1 sandwich. Okay, so what has been the change in our total product? Well, we're going to call this one TP2 and this one TP1. So we can take the pen here. It's not letting me. There we go. Okay, TP2 is 1 minus 0. Okay, so that's the change in our total product. That's supposed to be a parenthesis. Divided by what? The change in output. So, the change in labor. So labor number 2 minus labor number 1. So we hired 1 person, 1, and how many people did we have before? 0, right? Minus 0. Okay, so what is our formula here? It's 1 divided by 1 equals what? 1. That tells us that we added another person, and that additional person added 1 unit to the process. Okay, and so we can see that the answer down here, marginal product is 1, and we've carried over our average product from the previous graph. Okay, now I'm going to add another person to the process from here to there. Okay, now I've added another person. What has happened to our output? Well, our output has gone from 1 to 3. So what has that change been? Well, going back to our formula, total product 2 minus total product 1 divided by quantity of labor 2 minus quantity of labor 1. So let me find the eraser here and erase this stuff. Okay, so now we've come to this level. Okay, total product. This now is going to be our starting point, and we're going to go, okay, we had 3 units of product minus the previous output, which was 1. Okay, so that's total product 3 minus 1, and we're going to divide that, oh, sorry, that did not work out very well. Divide that by the change in labor. Okay, so what happened with labor? We went from 1 to 2. So 2 minus 1. Okay, so then that's going to be 3 minus 1 is 2, divided by 2 minus 1 is 1. That gives us marginal product of 2 units. Okay, what this tells us is that the second person added 2 Subway sandwiches to the process. Okay, one person alone was just doing 1 sandwich. Person number 2 comes in, and together they make 3 sandwiches. Okay, but that second person added 2 sandwiches to the process. On average, they are still making 1.5 sandwiches each. Okay, now we're going to look at what happens to our marginal product if we add a third person. And so I'm going to erase all of this so it doesn't get too crazy and messy. Okay. Okay, so we were here at 2, and now we're going to add a third person. Okay, and when that happens, our total product goes from 3 to 6. So why is this happening? Again, they're working together better, and they have like a little production line going. Okay, so our TP2 now is going to be 6 minus 3 divided by the change in labor. Okay, so we went from 2 to 3. So 3 units of labor minus the previous 2 units of labor. So that's 1. And 6 minus 3 is 3. So this tells us that our marginal product from the third person was 3 units. In other words, the third person added 3 units to the process. But note that the average product is still 2. Okay, so as we add more people, and you can see right here our marginal product, let's go over here to our little graph. Okay, this brownish curve right here, this is our marginal product curve, and let me label those. Okay, this is our total product curve. This is our average product curve, and this is our marginal product curve. Okay, so as we add more people, we can see that our marginal product is increasing. Oops, sorry, marginal product is increasing right here. Now note that it tops off at person number 3. Now remember that our average product kind of plateaued out between 3 and 4. And this is where our inflection on our total product starts to change. So this tells us that we are getting to that point where our capital is being used up. Okay. Okay, so we continue to add people over here. We go from 3 people to 4 people, and our total product goes from 6 units to 8 units. How much extra did person number 4 add? Well, person number 4 did not add as much as person number 3, right? Person number 4 added only 2 extra units. And the average product between all of those was two sandwiches. Okay, so this means that as we go to person number 4, okay, what has happened is now our marginal product is dropping. Okay. Now, marginal product is always going to intersect average product at the highest point, okay? So that has implications. Now, when this happens, we know that going forward, our productivity numbers are going to drop. If I add a 5th person, what happens? Our total product increases to 9, okay? But what happens to our marginal product? Well, again, and I'll just work, oh my goodness, sorry. I'll just erase this over here, and we'll just do this last few ones just to cement this. Okay, we went from 4 to 5 people, and our product went from 8 to 9. So our TP2 is 9. Minus our total product 1, 8, divided by quantity of labor is 5 minus 4. So it's 1 and 1. So 1 divided by 1 equals 1. So this means that the last person we hired only added 1 unit of output to the production process. Okay, so now we're over here on 5. 5 people and marginal products right there. Now, if we add a 6th person, what happens? Well, 6th person doesn't really add anything, right? Marginal product is 0. So right here, our marginal product is 0. Now note, where marginal product is 0, our total product, somewhere in between 5 and 6, and we would use calculus to figure this out, we have maxed out our productivity. Okay. If I add a 7th person, now we're really crowded and output has dropped. Okay. And so now our marginal product is down here, and our total, down here, and our productivity has gone down. Okay. Now, here's something to think about. During the beginning stages of the, let me erase all this so we can see this. During the beginning stages, when we start to add people, okay, we begin to have good output, right? More sandwiches are being produced. But every time we add a person, we have to pay wages, right? We have to pay for that person. So just bear this in mind, that if we have output coming into play, for every person we hire, we have to pay somebody. And so then the question is going to be, well, that represents a cost, okay? So if that represents a cost, then we're going to have to look at the flip side of this whole concept of production. Okay, so before we look at cost concepts, I want to look at this thing called diminishing marginal returns. The diminishing marginal returns, it basically means as you successively increase a variable resource, okay, as those are added to a fixed resource, the marginal product, in other words, the marginal product of labor, for example, in what we just saw, is going to increase and then it's going to decrease. For example, more workers are using the same workspace and equipment. So as more workers are employed, there is less and less for them to do, and they're more and more crowded. Increasing marginal returns happens at first when the marginal product of an additional worker adds more marginal product than the previous worker. That implies greater division of labor, specialization, and that machinery and equipment is being underused. When you have decreasing marginal returns, when the marginal product of an additional worker adds less marginal product than the previous worker, that's when the curve starts to slope downwards and we have decreasing marginal returns. So graphically, this is what it looks like. Okay, note that this first stage, this orange block here, we have increasing marginal returns, and note that we looked at, do you want to do that? Hold on a second. Okay, so we looked at here this point where marginal product is maxed. Okay, all of this here, this stage means we have increasing returns to labor, which basically means that as we add more labor, the return is going to be better for us. Then over here, where marginal product maxes out, that means we're going to begin to have decreasing marginal returns to labor. Okay, so marginal returns means as we add more workers, the what we're getting out of that worker is going to be less and less. Okay, now note that this goes all the way to the point where marginal product equals 0. Okay, now beyond that, it wouldn't make sense, certainly would not make sense to hire more people, because that extra person is actually reducing your output. And so this is negative returns to labor. Okay. Okay, so concepts that we talked about are short and long run. We talked about production concepts, total product, marginal product, average product, and stages of production. Okay, and next we're going to talk about cost. So stay tuned.